draft is in the books, which means round 2 and 3 completed in Green Bay. We'll break things down with Field Yates and Mel Kiper, plus a surprise for #1 pick Cam Ward during his introduction. But we begin with the story of the name we have not yet heard called, and it remains awfully surprising as the slide of Shedeur Sanders has continued through the second and third rounds. We're talking about the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year, 37 touchdown passes, 4,000 yards for the Buffs in Boulder. And he's waiting to be selected by a team. And you see the list of Field Yates' top quarterback prospects. Cam Ward went #1 overall. Jackson Dart, Tyler Shuck, Jalen Milroe, who went in the 3rd round to Seattle, Will Howard, Quinn Ewers, Dylan Gabriel not listed on Fields' top quarterback prospects. He has been selected as well, and Shedeur Sanders has not. Ahead of the draft, there was certainly enough smoke about the possibility of a slide for Sanders that last night wasn't completely shocking, which led to a great deal of conversation Friday about why. Now, if professional sports have taught us anything through the years, is that they will overlook plenty if they believe you can help their team. So I didn't buy that this had anything to do with who his father was. But that was one round. And the second round came and went. Then we got to the 3rd round, and then when Pittsburgh passed again for the 2nd time at pick number 83, I don't know the reason. I don't believe there's some league-wide conspiracy, because if a team wanted to take him, then they would take him. Thus far, nobody has. Now, there are plenty of quarterbacks who have succeeded when they were picked after the 3rd round or not picked at all. But those were not players that everyone was waiting on to be selected. The Saints thought to be in the market perhaps for a quarterback. They bypassed Sanders for a 2nd time in as many nights when they took Louisville's Tyler Shuck with the 40th overall pick. Potential replacement for Derek Carr. There remains curiosity and uncertainty about his health as Kellen Moore begins his first year as the Saints head coach. Pick makes Shuck the highest drafted quarterback for New Orleans since Archie Manning was picked 2nd in the 71 draft. Those were truly horrific Saints teams. Manning would go on to play a dozen seasons in New Orleans. Shuck played 6 years of college football. He was the backup to Herbert, Justin Herbert at Oregon. Also spent a bit of time at Texas Tech. Jalen Milroe, the next quarterback taken off the board, that by Seattle at pick number 92 in the 3rd round. He joins the new guy in town, Sam Darnold, in Seattle's quarterback. Joined now on the program by Field Yates. Field, you and I visited after round 1, and Shedeur Sanders had not been selected yet. I did not envision any scenario where I'd be visiting with you here on Friday night after rounds 2 and 3, with that still being the same situation and him being available come Saturday morning. That is where we are. What theories are there among the folks you talk to as to why that is the case?
Yeah, Scott, I am stunned. I thought last night when I mentioned the possibility of Shedeur Sanders maybe not being drafted in the 2nd round, that even perhaps I would look silly a day later and he would hear his name called within the first 5 or 6 selections tonight. So let's talk about how the quarterbacks are evaluated during this pre-draft process. Because I'll tell you this, on the field, Shedeur Sanders is a day 1 or day 2 selection. He was the only quarterback in the entire FBS last season who, when he was not under pressure, completed at least 80% of his passes. This is a 4-year starter who took 2 separate programs to unprecedented heights, extremely experienced, throws with great touch and accuracy, helped elevate the profile of other wide receivers beyond just Travis Hunter. It only leads me to believe that teams maybe are less comfortable with some of the stuff that comes into the intangibles department for Shedeur Sanders. And frankly, I'm not sure that's justified. Scott, I understand that Deion Sanders, and there's a lot of attention being paid to him being the son of one of the most notable athletes that we have seen in the history of professional sports. But frankly, I'm stunned. I don't have a good explanation for why Shedeur Sanders has not heard his name called. I had him as the 16th rated player on my board. I haven't been doing this nearly as long as Mel Kiper, but I can't imagine there have been too many instances where the 16th rated player on a big board is still available on day 3 or going into day 3. I am truly perplexed by why this situation has gotten to the point that we are now in.
Yeah, and we saw Mel at the end of the coverage, and he's just said, I'm disgusted. He's just stunned. I think we all understand how Mel feels about Sanders, has him as his top player on the board. Now, in some other storylines in terms of what we have seen through the first 2 days here, the Chicago Bears have a second-year quarterback, Caleb Williams, taken #1 last year. They have a new head coach in Ben Johnson, and I'm interested in how you assess what the Bears have done through 2 days and 3 rounds in this draft.
Yeah, I think Caleb Johnson has been smiling since about, late January when they hired Ben Johnson as their head coach, and no reason for Caleb to not be feeling optimistic right now. They end up reshaping the offensive line with 3 new starters, and then since the beginning of last night, the Bears have just continued to invest in pieces around Caleb Williams. Obviously, Colston Leaventh, the 10th overall pick last night out of Michigan, but tonight they go right back to the offensive well. Luther Burden, their first pick, the wide receiver out of Missouri. Scott, I thought coming into the season, he might have been a top 15 player in the entire class. He had over 1,200 receiving yards a year ago. This is a powerful, explosive player with the football in his hands. Great opportunities for Luther Burden III, and good things are going to happen. I'm sure Ben Johnson has that exact archetype in his mind. And then Ozzie Trapillo, their later pick in the second round, a right tackle, Boston College, who I think has the opportunity to play either side of the ball at the NFL level. And then finally, when you hire Dennis Allen as your defensive coordinator, you got to find guys that can rush up the field. And Shamar Turner, the defensive tackle out of Texas A&M, a former teammate of Shamar Stewart at Texas A&M. Good one-gap penetrator during his collegiate days. That should show up for Chicago, who has put some decent resources along the defensive tackle front this offseason, with Grady Jarrett being the veteran and now Turner being the rookie that he can be the understudy of Garrett of.
Field, there was a lack of clarity, a lack of consensus heading into round 1, right? There are teams that seem to maybe think there'd be 50 different players that could go in the first 32 picks, and that speaks to the true dudes as we typically see. How are we seeing it play out that there's a lack of clarity and consensus among teams through the first 3 rounds?
Yeah, I mentioned obviously Shedeur Sanders being 16 on my big board, and we're going into pick 103 tomorrow, and obviously he is still available. But Scott, I was getting texts midway through tonight of people saying, I can't believe a guy that we had, as a top 40 player is still available on the board. And conversely, hearing from teams saying, man, there's some players that we thought might be available in rounds 5 and 6 that have already gone off the board. I think the reality is that we always are tempted on our side, on the NFL draft analyst side, to stack these players vertically. I drop a top 200 is available about a week before the draft begins. For NFL teams, each of these teams is using a different scale, right? For them, it's what about the scheme fit? What do we know about the intangibles of the player? What are our positional needs that we have across our roster that really showed up tonight with players that I did not necessarily expect to come off the board, and then players that I did not expect to be available as we go into day 3?
I want to close with